In 1954, audiences walked into movie theaters expecting another standard monster flick, and instead, they met them, a nightmare born from the desert sands and the fear of the atomic bomb. Giant ants, mutated by radiation, began tearing through the American Southwest, and what followed wasn't just horror, it was history. This film was one of the very first to show how humanity's experiments with nuclear power could turn against it. Them, terrified audiences, influenced generations of filmmakers, and even shaped public imagination about the atomic age. Behind its crawling chaos lies a web of fascinating secrets, production struggles, strange coincidences, and cultural milestones. So let's dive deep into 15 weird facts about them. 1954, the film that started Hollywood's obsession with giant monsters and made everyone think twice about the desert buzzing outside their window. It was meant to be in 3D and color, until disaster. Struck originally, Them was supposed to be Warner Brothers' big 3D color showcase. The studio had invested heavily in 3D technology that was all the rage in the early 50s. Warner color cameras were rolled out, and a full 3D setup was used in early tests. But during the first few days of filming, the equipment failed repeatedly. The special 3D cameras jammed, overheated, and made the crew miserable in the desert heat. Eventually, the studio gave up, switching to black and white mid-production. That's why the only color in the movie is the bright red Them title in the opening credits, a haunting leftover of the abandoned plan. Ironically, the black and white format ended up enhancing the movie's eerie, documentary-style realism. The giant ants were 12-foot-tall mechanical monsters. Instead of using stop-motion like King Kong or Mighty Joe Young, Them went for full-sized mechanical ants. These enormous animatronic models were built on steel frames, covered with rubber and fur, and controlled by hydraulic systems. Each ant required multiple crew members to move, one for the legs, another for the jaws, and others for antennae and mandibles. The noise was deafening. The machines clanked and hissed constantly. Because of that, none of the live sound could be used. Every line of dialogue had to be re-recorded later in a studio. The ants also weighed hundreds of pounds, making it nearly impossible to shoot fast-paced action scenes. But despite these problems, their physical presence gave the film a realistic terror that digital effects still can't match. The ant sounds came from nature. Not machines. You might think those eerie screeches came from metal parts or audio effects, but the sound designers actually used nature. The sound team recorded bird calls, particularly from tree frogs and wood thrushes, then slowed them down and mixed them to create the unearthly chirping of the ants. Those chilling noises became iconic, reused in several later sci-fi films like The Black Scorpion and The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. Even decades later, sound engineers referenced them as an example of creativity in pre-digital sound design. Even the cast didn't know what Them meant during early production. The script title was kept a mystery. Warner Brothers only used the codename Them without revealing what the creatures were. Actors like James Whitmore and Joan Weldon received partial scripts, so when they finally saw the massive ant props on set, they were stunned. Joan Weldon reportedly thought it was a prank. When the crew rolled out the first full-size ant, she screamed, and the crew loved it so much they tried to capture that same reaction in her scenes later. James Arness almost returned as a monster before his legendary role as Marshall Dillon in Gunsmoke. James Arness had played the terrifying alien in The Thing from Another World, 1951. Because of that, Warner Brothers considered casting him in Them, possibly even in a man-in-suit role for close-up ant shots. But director Gordon Douglas wanted something different. He believed that showing mechanical monsters instead of actors in suits would feel more scientific and believable. It was a gamble, but one that paid off. Them launched the atomic monster era after Them, became a massive hit. Hollywood couldn't resist repeating its success. The film's blend of science fiction and atomic fear created a new subgenre, the giant creature mutation movie. Soon came Tarantula, 1955, Attack of the Crab Monsters, 1957, and Beginning of the End, 1957, all of which borrowed Them. Idea: radiation turning ordinary creatures into massive killers. Even Godzilla's U.S. popularity grew after Them. Success, solidifying the atomic monster craze of the 1950s. The U.S. military helped make it realistic. The U.S. Army and Air Force supported them. by providing equipment, vehicles, and technical advice. The movie's scenes of soldiers storming tunnels and patrolling the desert look surprisingly authentic because they used real military maneuvers. That cooperation gave them a different tone than other monster films of the era. It wasn't just a fantasy. It felt like a government response to a real emergency. The level of realism helped audiences believe in the story, and even critics praised its documentary-style tension. Filming in the desert was brutal, much of them. Was shot in California's Mojave Desert, which doubled for New Mexico. Daytime temperatures reached over 120 degrees, 49 degrees C, and the cast wore heavy army uniforms and gas masks during many scenes. Joan Weldon later recalled that actors fainted daily from dehydration. The ants' rubber shells soaked up heat, becoming nearly too hot to touch. Crew members working inside or behind them suffered burns. The production had to stop several times so medics could treat heat stroke cases. Despite all this, director Gordon Douglas insisted on shooting in real desert conditions to make the film look authentic. The ending was reshot multiple times. The original ending of Them was grim, showing the ants destroyed but implying humanity's doom was still coming. Test audiences found it too dark. The studio ordered reshoots to give it a more hopeful twist. In the final version, Dr. Medford, Edmund Gwenn, delivers the famous warning, "When man entered the atomic age, he opened a door into a new world." That closing line gave Them a haunting moral edge, transforming it from just a monster movie into a Cold War warning. A small role changed Fess Parker's life actor. Fess Parker had only a brief scene in Them, as a traumatized pilot who claims to have seen giant flying monsters. His nervous performance caught the attention of none other than Walt Disney. Impressed, Disney cast Parker as Davy Crockett, a role that made him a national star. In a way, those few minutes of screen time in Them launched one of the biggest TV careers of the 1950s. 11. It's one of the first films to link mutation and nuclear power. Them broke new ground by directly connecting atomic testing with mutation. Earlier monster films like King Kong or Dracula used fantasy or mythology, but Them rooted its horror in science. In the early 1950s, real atomic tests in the American Southwest were in the news. People genuinely feared what radiation might do to the environment. By turning those fears into a visible enemy, giant ants, Them captured the anxieties of an entire generation living under the mushroom cloud. Leonard Nimoy's early appearance, before he became Mr. Spock, Leonard Nimoy appeared briefly in Them as an army sergeant reading a telegram. It was one of his earliest film credits. Though the role is small, Nimoy later said he was proud to have been part of such a respected science fiction film. For many sci-fi fans, Them marks the start of a connection between old-school atomic horror and the futuristic optimism of Star Trek. The movie nearly had a very different. Title executives at Warner Brothers were nervous about releasing a movie with such a mysterious name. They thought audiences wouldn't understand what Them meant. Several other titles were suggested, including The Ants and the Devil in the Desert. Director Gordon Douglas fought hard to keep them. He argued that the vague, ominous title would spark curiosity, and he was right. The name itself became a kind of cultural shorthand for something big and terrifying. The film was nominated for an Academy Award in 1955. Them received an Oscar nomination for Best Special Effects. Though it didn't win, the nomination was a major recognition for a genre film, rare in an era when monster movies were often dismissed as cheap thrills. Critics praised its realism, performances, and message. Many modern film historians even call them the Citizen Kane of 1950s creature features. Them still shapes pop culture today. The influence of Them can be found everywhere. From Aliens, 1986, which borrowed its military siege structure, to Starship Troopers, 1997, which featured giant bug armies as a clear homage. Even video games like Fallout, Half-Life, and Earth Defense Force echo them. Post-nuclear monster themes. The 2018 film Love and Monsters directly references Them in tone and design. For decades, directors like James Cameron, Steven Spielberg, and Guillermo del Toro have cited Them as an inspiration for blending science, fear, and realism in creature design. 70 years later, Them still crawls across screens with the same unsettling power it had in 1954. Beneath the buzzing horror and B-movie thrills lies a serious warning about technology, arrogance, and how quickly control can slip away once we open Pandora's nuclear box. Its legacy goes beyond ants. It's about the cost of progress and the shadow of human invention. Them wasn't just a monster movie. It was a message to the world. Beware what your science might unleash. Every echo of those screeching sounds reminds us that fear isn't always about the creatures outside. Sometimes, it's about us.